Okay, so we're going to be talking about some cultural norms as far as diet is concerned, and we're going to start to challenge these cultural norms. Um, so take a look at these images. Obviously, these are very concerning. Smoking has become a pretty big problem among young people in other parts of the world. It's always been a problem here, but we've done a pretty good job in the U.S. in cutting back smoking rates. Smoking in the U.S. is at an all-time low, and U.S. Actually smokes much less than people in other countries. So these are all real pictures. In certain parts of Asia, smoking among young people is a pretty big problem. So the thing is, we all recognize that this is a major problem. But what about this? Um, Processed meat consumption. Processed meat is hot dogs, lunch meat, bacon. Uh, Considered perfectly normal in our culture. And yet there is a great deal of evidence to suggest that processed meat consumption elevates your risk for disease. So we're going to take a look at this. So again, why is it that these images are so concerning, but these images are perfectly normal, and we don't even think twice about it? What would happen if at the Phillies game, the Philly fanatic was shooting cigarettes out at the people instead of hot dogs? He'd probably get arrested on the spot. So um, imagine that you moved to a culture in which smoking was considered to be manly, and men that did not smoke were considered to be effeminate. And there are actually cultures where this is the case. Um, would you start smoking just to protect your image? Obviously, we're talking more to the men here right now. So now consider a culture that considers meat consumption to be manly, despite the overwhelming evidence that regular meat consumption elevates the risk for disease. Does it really make sense to continue to do something that's unhealthy simply to conform to society? Um, just some information about smoking here. Overall, smoking is bad news. I think everybody knows that. Globally, about half the men in the world smoke. About 48% of the men smoke. It's still primarily a man's habit. 12% of women smoke. I think in the U.S., that's probably closer to 50-50. I don't know that for sure, but I think a higher percentage of women smoke in the U.S. But again, still in the U.S., we're pretty low compared to the rest of the world. Um, but overall, especially in the U.S., smoking is frowned upon. Tobacco use is recognized as a major public health threat. But what about processed meats? Um, these are some of the recommendations made by some of the major medical and public health groups. Harvard School of Public Health tells us limit red meat and avoid processed meat. People who eat even modest amounts of red meat have higher risk of developing colon cancer, heart disease, diabetes. So just make it occasionally rather than regularly, and skip the processed stuff, bacon, hot dogs, deli meats, since that's linked even more strongly to cancer, heart disease, and diabetes. World Cancer Research Fund limit intake of red meat to no more than 11 ounces a week, and avoid processed meat due to the link between colorectal cancer. Um, Now, this is a direct quote. There is no amount of processed meat that can be confidently shown not to increase risk. So, in other words, even small amounts of processed meat will increase risk for disease. The World Cancer Research Fund has come out and said that until we know more, no one should be consuming processed meat. All right, they didn't exactly say that it's unfit for human consumption, but they almost said that. It was interpreted that way. American Institute for Cancer Research: limit consumption of red meat, avoid processed meat. There's convincing evidence that processed meat increases chances of colorectal cancer. Um, they give some reasons for why that meat may be causing these issues. Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine: processed meats have been so strongly linked to colorectal cancer that no amount is considered safe. Even one hot dog per day can raise your risk of colorectal cancer by 21%. Uh, American Cancer Society, they talk about how 1/3 of our cancer deaths are due to poor nutrition. That's an estimate. They don't know that for sure. It's kind of hard to pinpoint that exactly. But overall, the recommendation is consume a healthy diet, with an with an emphasis on plant sources, and limit consumption of processed and red meats, because there's evidence that a diet high in red and processed meats is associated with gastrointestinal cancers. National Cancer Institute: limit red meat to 18 ounces a week and eliminate processed meat. So they remember Harvard. If you remember, Harvard says no more than 6 ounces of red meat a week. Another group said 11 ounces of red meat a week. National Cancer Institute says 18 ounces of red meat a week is okay. But the National Cancer Institute is also telling us to have 6.5 cups of fruits and vegetables daily, which comes out to be 13 servings of fruits and vegetables. So they have more meat in their recommendations, but they also have more fruits and vegetables in their recommendations. So, it's up to you. Some of the research that's been done: pregnant women that consume processed meat increase the risk of brain tumors in their children, which is the second most prevalent form of pediatric cancers. Children that consume high levels of hot dogs have nearly 10 times the risk of leukemia, which is the most prevalent form of pediatric cancer. Processed meat increases the risk for bladder cancer, endometrial cancer, prostate cancer, thyroid cancer, stomach, colon, rectal, pancreatic, lung, prostate, testicular, kidney, bladder cancer, leukemia, throat cancer, esophageal cancer, stomach cancer, colon cancer, rectal cancer. All right, so this stuff is no good. We've known this for quite a while, and there's no way that any group should be advocating the consumption of processed meat at this point. Unfortunately, there is some groups. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. So this was formerly known as the ADD, I think it was, the American Dietetic Association, ADA, American Dietetic Association. So registered dietitians. Registered dietitians are registered with the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. It's the largest nutrition group in the country. They are primarily financially supported by the food industry, which is why some of their recommendations are a little shady. No consistent evidence links protein intake to increase or lowered risk of most cancers. Some studies suggest a link between colon cancer and eating large amounts of red meat, especially processed meat, but this is inconclusive. This is the only group that is saying that this is inconclusive. And again, it's because they're supported primarily, among other groups, by the meat industry. If you look at that first line, no consistent evidence links protein intake to cancer. Well, of course that's true, because you can get protein from beans or broccoli or whole grains. It's not the protein itself, it's the source of the protein. It's the animal protein, specifically protein from processed meat. So, again, in 2011, the AND, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, listed 38 food industry sponsors. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association is the largest. Companies like General Mills, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Kraft Foods, all these companies financially support AND, which is why, most of their recommendations are based around, processed food is okay. Most of the information actually from the Academy is pretty solid, and every dietitian that I know has been wonderful. In fact, a lot of the dietitians that work at Monco helped me with a lot of the nutrition information in this course. So it's not the dietitians themselves; it's just the way that the corporate sponsorship unfortunately works. So this is just some information about what we're eating overall, and you can pause this and read through this, but basically the standard American diet is not very good. We eat a lot of meat. We eat a lot of food overall. We eat a lot of meat. We eat a lot of dairy, more dairy than we possibly need, and we eat a lot of flour products, especially white flour. So those are the kinds of things that we need to cut out. And we consume a lot of sugar. It comes out to be about 100 to 140 grams a day. And what I would encourage you to do, if you have time, is weigh out 100 grams of sugar and take a look at what that looks like. I think you'd be surprised. Pink slime, you may have seen this before. The British cook Jamie Oliver did a big thing on pink slime a couple years ago. This is what's in your hot dog. This is what is in your chicken nuggets. In a lot of McDonald's hamburgers, this is what it is. And this is the quotes directly from the USDA. Mechanically separated meat is a paste-like and batter-like meat product produced by forcing bones with attached edible meat under high pressure through a sieve to separate the bone from the edible meat tissue. They're not allowed to do this with beef anymore, but they still do it with pork and chicken. So if you look at the really cheap hot dogs in the supermarket, it's mechanically separated poultry and mechanically separated pork. So basically, they just take the animals and they put them through a sieve that separates the bones from the cheaper parts of the meat, and then they put it into a hot dog. So kind of gross. If you want, you can look up, just Google or look on YouTube for how hot dogs are made, and you'll see it's pretty graphic detail. Scrapple, for those of us that grew up in Philadelphia, I love this stuff growing up. I don't eat it anymore, obviously. This isn't on the list of processed meats because most people don't know what it is. But if you look at the ingredients here, liver, fat, pork snouts, pork hearts, and then the other version of scrapple: pork stock, pork skins, pork hearts, pork liver, pork tongue. All right, so you need to think about the kind of thing that you're putting into your body. So as far as cancer rates are concerned, even though we cut smoking, at one point we smoked, almost half the population smoked. Now we're down to about 19%. But unfortunately, the cancer rates did not really go down very much. In fact, they didn't go down at all. The cancer death rate is, they calculate this out per rate. So it's about 200 for every 100,000 people. So for every 100,000 Americans, there are 200 that will die from cancer per year. This is about the same rate as it was in 1950 when almost half the population was smoking. All right, so we made some pretty good steps in cardiovascular disease and some other forms of disease, but we really have not made any progress in cancer. It's unfortunate. We've done some work with the 5-year survival rates. They have improved a little bit, but part of that is what they call lead time bias. Due to the extensive screening programs, basically people are finding out earlier that they have cancer. They're not really living longer with the cancer. They're just they're just more stressed out about it, basically, because they know for a longer period of time that they have cancer. So lung cancer, of course, is still the main form of cancer mortality. Only about 50% of smokers develop lung cancer. So that's important to remember. Only about 50% of the people that smoke will get lung cancer. Now, the other 50% are going to get cardiovascular disease or COPD or another form of respiratory disease. So it's really only 50% get lung cancer. But of the people that have lung cancer, 90% of them are smokers. All right. So does smoking cause cancer? Well, not really, because if it did, then everybody who smoked would get cancer. And it's the same way with meat. Not everybody who eats meat is going to get colorectal cancer, but eating heavy amounts of red meat is going to significantly increase your risk of getting cancer. All right, so that's what we need to kind of think, that it's all about a risk. It's all about a game of risk. All right. Here's some facts about hot dogs. So there's a local school right near where we live, and their menu is online. And you can do this for most schools. I would encourage you to do it. 85% of the school days, processed meat was on the menu. Refined carbohydrates, white flour, things like that, sugar was on the menu every single day. They did offer fruits and vegetables every day, but it was probably conventionally raised, probably wasn't very certainly wasn't locally grown. No whole grains were offered. Some what they call whole wheat breads were offered, but that's not really whole wheat bread. It's, again, that white bread with a fake tan. It's bread, it has a little bit of whole wheat flour in it, but it also has a lot of white flour in it. And again, this is the USDA doing a wonderful job on our school lunch programs. National Hot Dog and Sausage Council estimates that Americans consume, comes out to be about 66 hot dogs a year per person. That's just hot dogs. That doesn't include deli meats and bacon. And there's a couple theories as to exactly why processed meats cause so much problems. So they think it might be the nitrites and the nitrates. There's probably a lot of issues. I think this is certainly one of them, but there's probably a lot of issues. Certainly the saturated fat. is an issue. So, keep in mind, hot dogs are as American as baseball, apple pie, obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. All right. Smoking remains to be the main underlying cause of cancer deaths, but it's viewed by the public as a major public health risk. And processed meat needs to be seen as the same. Um, these products should never be promoted by any federal, state, or local government organization. Any school, any uh, any local government, any state government, any federal government, anybody that promotes the consumption of processed meats is blatantly ignoring all the science behind the nutrition. And that's a shame because they're telling people to ignore science, which is really unfortunate. Okay. And again, keep in mind 90 to 95% of all cancers are preventable. Eat a plant based diet, limit your alcohol, get enough physical activity, keep a healthy weight, manage your stress, don't smoke. Um, Again, plant based diet, you can have a little bit of meat, just make sure it's high quality meat, that's all. Um, and be careful in the sun too, and never use a tanning bed. We'll get to that in another section, okay? I hope this was helpful.